West Michigan Cannabis Guild, Tammy, has 200 members plus. Tell me a little bit more about that particular guild.
Yeah, so we formed the West Michigan Cannabis Guild, myself and Mike Tuffelmeyer, who you know well from MI Legalize as well, and has been my partner in crime on all things cannabis on the West Side, all the way back to when we decriminalized in 2012. So we've been working, fighting this fight for many years together. So we co-founded the West Michigan Cannabis Guild once we won in 2018, once adult use came through, thanks to your work, lots of people's work, and the voters and common sense. The West Michigan had been extremely far behind other parts of the state, including Lansing, Detroit, Traverse City, and others. We had everything shut down a long time ago, the few dispensaries that had kind of popped up around the Grand Rapids area. And so Mike and I were talking, and we said, this is just going to be really brutal if we put all this time and energy into this fight, and we have been all over the state, and then we go home after the big win, and nothing's changed. There's nothing for us. Same old, same old. So we said, all right, let's start organizing on another level. Let's start organizing now. We've legalized this statewide. That's amazing. People are not getting arrested like they were. Access is better. Product is better. All kinds of people are thriving. However, how do we get licenses in more communities on the west side of the state? How do we get these licenses into not just all corporate hands? How do we get some locals in? How do we get some people of color? How do we get funds to people harmed by the drug war? What about expungements? You know, so they were just, we had this huge win, but then there were all these other issues that needed serious attention. And so all of the ragtag motley crew group of West Michigan activists, which many of whom are pretty hardcore because we are in, you know, we're in DeVos land. We're in like right-wing billionaire area of the country in some ways, and definitely in the state. And so, you know, people are fighters over here. So we had to get together because none of us could do this stuff on our own. So we needed to get organized and we needed to unite.
Not to interrupt, but I grew up in a Grand Rapids suburb of Wyoming, so I'm real familiar with West
Hey,
Michigan. It's very
yeah.
conservative, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For our viewers that may not be familiar with Michigan, the 2012 decriminalization that Tammy mentioned was a local decriminalization program that was enacted in Grand Rapids. It's one of the things that helped us be successful to get the MMFLA in 2016 and then the MRTMA in 2018. And the west side of the state, I mean, seriously, from all the way down here to all the way up here, very conservative. So it's more difficult to be an activist in a place where your actions are really not appreciated. Talk a little bit about how difficult it's been, you know, being a prominent person who supports cannabis and also a person who has, you know, traditional businesses like the pyramid scheme. You have restaurants and nightclubs. How has that affected your business?
It's interesting. When I got into this work, we did our big launch for decriminalized GR, and I had been involved with drug policy work before that. I chaired an organization called the Red Project, which we were able to get syringe exchange throughout the city. We were able to distribute Narcan. So I had done a lot of work around drug policy and had been involved in that national movement. So I was pretty knowledgeable and had a lot of good contacts, but I'm not gonna lie, it was a bit of a coming out. The very first signature we got for decriminalized GR was at the Meanwhile, one of my little neighborhood pub on Wealthy Street. And I just remember people were scared to sign it. They were like, oh, my employer could look this up. This is public, right? So, and it was brutal. We had the police, you know, kind of driving by regularly. It was overwhelmingly positive. I have to say my businesses are a little more niche, you know, my venue is called the Pyramid Scheme. So we had made clear that we're not necessarily part of this conservative establishment and had been pretty vocal about that. But this was, you know, when you start moving policy, that's where the establishment really starts bristling, right? You know, changing policy and doing it through citizens initiatives. That's when people really start to get angry. And so nobody thought we were going to win. I think that that was actually helpful because we didn't have this massive opposition. We had a lot of preachers preaching, do not support this. However, we won overwhelmingly. And, that's when all the lawsuits started. And I think people were, oh my goodness, I cannot believe this passed, in terms of some of the elites. And so a lot of the fight kind of came afterwards, and it was in court for a while. But certainly we got a lot of fans, we got a lot of business, but we also, we got a lot of nastiness. Absolutely.
Now, the western side of Michigan, at the top of the mitten is Traverse City, which is a pro-cannabis location. At the bottom of the mitten is Niles, in the area down by Indiana, which has really developed quite a robust cannabis industry. And right in the center of that palm would be essentially Grand Rapids. But in all the areas in between, including Wyoming, it's still a struggle to get people to recognize that cannabis, first of all, is just medicine, even though we've been saying that for 12 years now, and that cannabis businesses are not only tolerable, but welcomed and an essential part of a successful city in Michigan. Where do you find the greatest amount of resistance on the west side still lingering today?
So I would start with the places that have done well. I would say hands down, Muskegon has been a leader sort of in the center west part of, and in terms of the guild, I think there's been the most opportunity for non-corporate folks in the Muskegon area. Grand Rapids, the only reason they opted in when they did was because we started yet another ballot initiative to force them to do that called Safe and Smart. And they ended up opting in prior to it going on the ballot. So we didn't have to go through that whole thing. We just were getting so much support, we kind of forced them to opt in. Wyoming and Kentwood, I think, would probably be the next targets. They both voted heavily in favor of Proposal 1. However, the commissions there, the councils are very prohibitionist. And that's one of the reasons, we've launched these endorsements, right? Because what we've done, we always try to work with who's there, right? Who are the current people? Who are the current elected officials? Can we educate them? Can we lobby? Can we move them in the right direction of what the people clearly wanted, right? And that's had very mixed results. I would say we've won a handful of people over here and there. Grand Haven, you're going to talk to Jamie Cooper. It's amazing that they are opting in, but that's been relentless advocacy. I would say Holland, Michigan is probably the most anti-marijuana of our West Michigan area. That's Prince family is very, very powerful there, and lots of evangelical.
And Betsy DeVos is the Prince, by the way.
Right, Betsy DeVos, Eric Prince of Blackwater.
Eric Prince from, what was it, something Water? What was it, that mercenary group?
Blackwater.
Blackwater, yes, okay.
Yeah, so I think Holland, and then you have some of these suburban areas, Granville, Jettison, that, they'll be the last to, it'll probably be 10, 20 years from now. Yeah. So we're really looking at lowest hanging fruit, but what we're finding is so many elected officials just are not listening. They just had this idea about marijuana, and that's it. They don't want to change their mind, and they don't care how the people voted. And so that's why we're really targeting, we're just going to have to change some of these people, because look what a difference getting Nestle in there made, and Whitmer, and the conversation is totally different than the conversation we were trying to have with Snyder and Schuette. And so we've really focused on getting better candidates throughout West Michigan and throughout at the state level as well.
Let's talk a little bit about that, if we may. Certainly what you can do is send me, since we published the Michigan Marijuana Report, your list of endorsements, and we'll do a story about that. But anything you want to say right now to the audience that we have here about any level? I mean, from the senators to the congressmen to the local folks, anything like that you want to talk about?
Sure. Yeah. So we are actually announcing our endorsements today.
Ooh, perfect.
Yep. So check out the West Michigan Cannabis Guild Facebook page for those announcements. We've got, I think, 2 state reps and a county commissioner and a couple of others. But so please check out who we're endorsing. And one other plug, we've done candidate forums. You know, everything's changed this year. We've had to pivot. We've had to, okay, everybody's exhausted. What is the highest priority work we can do? So we've been doing candidate forums online. Our last and fourth one will be on October 21st. And that's going to be a fascinating one because we have a couple federal level candidates. We've got Brian Burkhoff, who is very competitive and actually in sort of the Holland, West Michigan area. He's a pastor, and that's a fascinating race to watch, as well as we're going to have Peter Meyer, who is, from another prominent
conservative family. Yes.
So it'll be fascinating to hear from him. We had his opponent, Hillary Skolton, on a previous forum, and that race is 50-50. So if folks want to learn more about these candidates, and then we've got a judge on there, but that'll be on October 21st. You can just view it on our Facebook page. And yeah, so that's exciting, and just really encouraging everybody, get involved, get to know the candidates, listen to them, and of course vote.
I know we're coming up on our segment with Bruce Linton, so we just have a moment or two left. Let me just ask 2 real quick questions. Do you think your membership would support an increase in the excise tax on adult use cannabis in Michigan? And secondly, how can people potentially learn about or join the West Michigan Cannabis Guild?
Yeah, that isn't something that we've discussed. I would say, generally speaking, a lot of folks, especially out here, everything is moving so slow, and adult use has not even arrived in Grand Rapids yet. So most of the licensees are not turning a profit at this point, with Just Medical and with so many delays because Grand Rapids has dragged their feet every possible part of the way. So it's hard to say whether there would be support for additional taxes when folks aren't turning a profit yet. Maybe in the future as things get moving. And then in terms of joining, you can go to our website, West Michigan Cannabis Guild.org. So and you can join there, or through our Facebook page. And we haven't had membership meetings. We are going to have our first virtual membership meeting November 2nd, day before the election. So we can try to get people riled up. If there's anybody that hasn't voted yet, or if there's anybody like me that's going in person no matter what, come that day and learn about a few more candidates and get reminded to get out there and vote.